What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another episode of NBA Hot Takes. It's been a little bit since we've done one of these. It's the midst of the offseason. There's not exactly a lot to talk about in the NBA world right now, so I figured I'd go ahead and cover a bunch of topics, talk about your hot takes, which y'all dropped over 200 of them, so not every take is going to be in this video. If you want to be in a future video, make sure to follow me over on Twitter, but I picked out some of my favorites. I went with more than usual. I think we've got like 12 or so it'll be a bit of a longer episode. I'm going to go ahead and show the take, tell you why I agree or disagree, and I'd love to hear your opinions, of course, down below in the comments as well, and some of your own hot takes. It's always fun to get that discussion going, but first, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos, and let's go ahead and get into the hot takes. First one comes from my guy Alex Bowlerjack, who says the only team from California to make the playoffs will be Sacramento, so that means no Lakers, no Warriors, no Clippers. Clippers and Warriors, I think there's a decent shot they don't make the playoffs. I'm not very high on either of those teams now. The Clippers do still have James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, but it feels like there's some injury with Kawhi every single season. Harden's been pretty injury prone in his recent career as well, so I don't know if I trust both of them to be healthy for a full season. They definitely can make the playoffs if they keep everybody on the court, but it's not something I'm banking on. I don't think it's a guarantee. For the Golden State Warriors, same thing. Steph Curry's amazing. The last year they didn't make the playoffs. I do like some of the depth pieces they added. Young guys are going to improve, but they still don't have that second option. I don't know who's going to consistently score outside of Steph Curry. I don't know if they're going to be particularly really good on either side of the ball. So that's another team I could see missing the playoffs as well. For the Lakers, I don't know, because I don't love their depth at all, but it's a team with LeBron James, Anthony Davis. I do think JJ Redick is going to do a solid job coaching. I don't know if he's one of the best coaches in the league from day one, but I think he's going to do a decent job. And I just don't know if I want to bet against that type of team to miss the playoffs. Now, I will say both those guys, LeBron and AD, are injury prone. They were pretty healthy last year, both played around 70 games, and they were still a playing squad. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that all three of those teams could miss. Even for the Kings, there is a world where the defense is just so disastrous the DeMar thing doesn't work, and maybe they miss the playoffs, although I feel pretty good about them being right there in that mix. So yeah, I think all four California teams are a bit up in the air. I do feel like Sacramento is the best bet alongside the Lakers, but if the Warriors and Clippers don't make it, not surprised. So I'll say this is a solid take. Speaking of Western Conference playoff teams, we've got a take from Hoodie Nas, who says that the Nuggets will not have home court advantage in the 2025 playoffs, so won't be a top 4 seed in his opinion, which is a bit hard for me to imagine just because they have Nikola Jokic. They've got the best player in the world, a guy that willed a decimated Nuggets team to the 6th seed back in 2022. Now, the Western Conference has gotten better, if you ask me, over that time. It's not impossible that they're not a top 4 seed because I do think losing KCP is going to be big. It's going to hurt their defense. I don't know how I feel about Christian Brown as that full-time starter. Maybe he proves me wrong, but I'm worried there's going to be some regression there. I'm a bit worried about Jamal Murray. How is he going to play this upcoming season? Because the playoffs weren't good. Team Canada was not good either. I think he'll be back and perfectly fine, but there is slight reason to be worried, I guess, going to this upcoming season. Is there a lingering injury that's still bothering him and will continue to? Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, they still have a really good starting 5. The depth is rough, though. I think Russell Westbrook could be pretty good off the bench. I do like the Dario Saric pickup, but then it's a lot of really young guys who are pretty unproven in a Western Conference full of proven teams and squads that seem extremely stacked. It is a little bit worrying. I am going to say the Nuggets do have home court advantage, but it's not impossible that they're below a few teams. I think OKC, Minnesota, and Dallas are threats to be up there in that top 4. I think the Nuggets probably round out my top 4 if I had to pick right now. But there are some teams that theoretically could really make a big jump, some of whom we'll continue to talk about in this video, but I think the Nuggets still will end up as a top 4 squad. Speaking of top 4 team conversations, It's Me CR1 says that the Rockets will be a top 4 seed next season, not in a couple of years, next year. And I've seen this take, maybe not this specific one, but a lot of people being extremely high on the Rockets circulating throughout this offseason. And it's understandable. It feels like every year there's some kind of breakthrough team that shocks the world. It was the Grizzlies a few years ago. It was the Thunder this season. Could the Rockets be next? There's a couple things that worry me about that. Now, don't get me wrong, I like this Rockets team, and I think there's a real world where they are in the playoffs this season. That would not surprise me, but to be a top 4 seed, a lot of things would have to go right. Jalen Green would not only have to keep up doing what he did at the end of last season, but even build off of that. You would need jumps from Ahmed Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., Cam Whitmore. Tari Eason would have to really elevate his game as well, and he's already a pretty good role player. I think Şengün would have to improve. The whole team would have to level up. They've got to maintain that defense, become a much better offense. I don't think it's all going to happen quite that way. Also, they don't have that all NBA caliber player on the roster. Maybe someone breaks through, maybe Jalen Green suddenly is that guy, maybe Şengün levels up, but I have not seen it yet. Like when the Grizzlies did it, they had Ja Morant. With the Thunder, they had Shea, who was a back-to-back All-NBA first-team guard. You can't be a top 4 team in that Western Conference, in my opinion, if you don't have one of those guys. The teams we talked about earlier, Mavs have Luka, Timberwolves have Anthony Edwards, Jokic and the Nuggets. Again, Thunder have Shea. They have all NBA caliber players. Someone could get there for the Rockets, but I don't think it's quite yet. Again, if they're in the playoffs, it wouldn't surprise me. They have a bunch of depth, a lockdown defense, and tons of potential to improve with a young team. But top 4, it feels very early for that. Once again, sticking in the Western Conference, we've got a take from Riley, who says that the Grizzlies will finish as the 1 seed in the Western Conference. And this goes along a lot of Grizzlies takes in the comments. I just picked this one because I felt like it was the most interesting. Like there was one from Jared Davidson who said Ja is going to finish top 3 in MVP voting. And there were a ton of people saying Ja MVP or Grizzlies are going to shock the world. You might think this isn't that hot of a take that the Grizzlies are going to be really good this season, but I feel like I've seen a lot of people, and there were even some comments on the tweet saying that the Grizzlies are going to miss the playoffs, that they'll be a play-in team. I feel like this Grizzlies squad is really good. Like Ja Morant, I feel like a lot of people have forgotten just how insane he is, how much of a force of nature he is when he's out there on the court. Jaren Jackson Jr., still one of the best defenders in the NBA. Desmond Bane is a borderline all-star guard, and I still think he's got all-star appearances in him at some point, if not ending up as one of the better non-all-stars we've seen in recent history. I'm excited to see what Marcus Smart can do with that team, him and Jaren Jackson on the squad. Plus, now you have the size of Zach Edey. It builds a team that I think could be really good defensively. I'm excited about players like Vince Williams, who really blossomed last year, Gigi Jackson. I don't know how prominent his role is going to be in a championship contending team, or at least a team that's hopeful to compete for a championship, but I think he could be a really fun player off the bench for them. I'm excited about this Grizzlies team. Now, do I think they're going to be as good as some of the other top squads in the West? I'm not sure, just because I think there could be some rust. They've dealt with a number of injuries over the last few years, so I'm worried that's going to pop up. Like Zach Edey was in and out of Summer League. Obviously, Ja Morant had a season-ending injury last year. Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. Everybody's been hurt in some kind of way over the last calendar year for the Grizzlies. But if they can stay healthy and really lock in from the get-go, there isn't that rust. I like Taylor Jenkins as a coach too. I do think the Grizzlies are another squad that could theoretically push for a top 4 seed. And if Ja Morant is really popping off, having a bit of a revenge tour after people seemingly have written him off, an MVP case doesn't feel completely out of the realm of possibility. Now, do I think he'll win it? Probably not, just because I don't know if they're going to be better than like the Thunder, who have Shea. Of course, like Jokic is always going to be in that conversation as well. You've got Luka with the Mavericks, and it feels like Luka is overdue for one. I don't know if he's going to outperform all of those guys to win the award. Giannis as well, of course, Joel Embiid. If the Sixers really put things together over there, there's a bunch of names you could talk about. But if Ja Morant is in those conversations for a lot of the season, or even finishes top 5 All-NBA first team, I personally wouldn't be that surprised. And if the Grizzlies are one of the top 4 teams, they've got home court advantage, don't count me as surprised either. Next hit comes from my guy, The Ball, who says Cade will be an all-star this season. Also mentioned that the Grizzlies will be a top 4 seed, but we just talked about that. So we'll stick with the Cade thing. I don't feel like this is that hot of a take. There are a few people who mentioned Cade or Pistons-related stuff. Dylan, my guy, shout out to him, longtime supporter of the channel, mentioned that the Pistons would not be a bottom 3 team in the Eastern Conference. Seems like a little bit of Pistons hype, and I'm hopeful the Pistons have a better season, because the past few years have been really, really rough to watch. They have been the worst team in the league. They get the 5th overall pick. It's like they're stuck in a Groundhog Day situation. So I'm rooting for the Pistons. I want to see them play well, and I do think Cade Cunningham is one of the more underrated players in the NBA at this point. Like Cade, considering the circumstances, the horrific spacing, the seemingly coach who wanted to sabotage the team, it felt like at times, he had a really good season. 22.7 points per game, 45% from the field, 35% from deep, 7.5 dimes, and he really turned it up towards the end of the season. There was one point during that massive losing streak where Cade was consistently putting up 30 pieces and 40-point games. They just couldn't get wins because it was a hyper untalented team. Now, is Tobias Harris going to fix that? No, but that's an NBA player next to him. I'm excited to see what Jaden Ivey could do in another year. I think bringing in a new head coach with JB Bickerstaff in and of itself is going to be massive for this team. Jalen Duren is an exciting player. Sarr Thompson, like they've got a lot of really exciting young talent. They just need to put it together, and I think it starts with Cade Cunningham. I'm a believer he will be an all-star this season. He's going to put it together, prove some people wrong, although there are a lot of great guards in the East, so maybe he ends up as one of the snubs, but at the very least, he's going to be firmly in those conversations, and this will be a way better year for the Pistons. Going over to the Eastern Conference, we've got a take from WB, who says, barring injury, Paolo will be top 10 by the end of the season. If not top 10, at least top 15. Paolo feels pretty polarizing, at least recently on NBA Twitter. There was some viral posts that said that he was actually not that good. There was a lot of rebuttal by Magic fans and just NBA fans in general. Paolo's amazing. He is a phenomenal player for someone who's in his second season, going into his third one now, I guess. He was an all-star in his second year. He was the best player on a team that nearly won a playoff series. He's an incredible talent, but there are weaknesses in his game. Specifically, the efficiency is rough, and don't love the shot diet. It feels like he takes way too many jumpers for a guy who's at his size, who could just bully guys and get down to the rim. But that's all stuff that's going to come over time. I feel like it's premature to say that he's going to be a top 10 player by the end of the season, because there are a lot of ridiculous talents. Like, you try to make a top 10 list right now, it's nearly impossible. I would know. I tried to do it the other day with a couple friends. It was a big struggle to find just 10 players, and you were leaving some ridiculous names off. So I don't think he'll be top 10. Top 15, I could have a conversation with, but even that might be a little bit of a stretch. I think firmly he will be a top 20 player by the end of the season. You give him a few more years, he will be pretty much unanimously top 10. Paolo is one of those guys that's on that trajectory. I'm just not going to rush it too much, because there's stuff to work on with his game, and you never really know with young players. I don't want to throw these lofty expectations on a guy like Paolo who's already really, really good. Give him time. Same thing with his Magic team, because they are arriving pretty quickly as a young squad, but you got to let them go ahead and play things out. Meanwhile, Triple T has a take that the Knicks are going to regret retaining OG Anunoby over Ihart. OG's the better player, still fits on the roster, but Robinson is their only good center. He's injury prone, doesn't trust Randall or Achua as their center rotation, especially in a conference with Giannis, Embiid, and Bam. This is something that I am worried about with the Knicks. I recently made a video that was one question for every NBA team in 2025, and for the Knicks, my question was, what do they do about the big man spot? Do they trust it as is, or do they try and go ahead and add somebody else? Because Mitchell Robinson is really good, but he is injury prone, and behind him it's Precious Achua, who, like Triple T, I don't trust that much as my starting center in the playoffs. It's Jericho Sims. It feels like they need to add another body there, and there's still plenty of time. They've got all throughout the season to go ahead and do so. I imagine they will, but that is one of their big issues now in terms of retaining OG over Ihart. 100% understand that. OG is the better player, and I'm saying that about Ihart, who is now on my favorite team, the Oklahoma City Thunder, so I'm glad they went ahead and made that decision in that right. But also they traded Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett, two key pieces of their team, two young guys, to bring in OG Anunoby. They had to keep him. There was no way they weren't going to, especially because he made a massive impact on that defense. He's one of the best wing defenders in the NBA. And when you're in a conference that has like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown as the wings of the team you're trying to go ahead and take down in the Celtics, having OG as well as Mikal Bridges, who they also added, it makes a lot of sense. I think they built this team well. They do need to address that big man spot, but overall, I think keeping OG Anunoby in that situation was a no-brainer if they could pick one or the other. Hopefully they will add another big at some point during the season, though. I do agree with that. Speaking of the Knicks, Knicks Info says that the Sixers barely improved this offseason. PG wasn't a need. It was a top backup center and more high-end role players. Big three are dead. Paul George has proven he can't win with a big three. I don't agree with this. I think the Sixers had a phenomenal offseason. PG was a need, if you ask me, because the Sixers have really longed for that really good two-way wing, that connecting player. And I think Paul George is exactly that. Replacing Tobias Harris with Paul George as the third max guy is such a massive improvement. And in addition to that, they still added high-end role players. They retained Kelly Oubre, who was really good for them last season. And I think now that he's going to have more talent around him, the efficiency will come up. That was the big knock on him last season. They brought in Caleb Martin, who has been one of the better role players for the Heat over the last few seasons. I love that pickup for them. Eric Gordon isn't a crazy good role player anymore, but in just a small bench role, I think he'll be fine. I do think Drummond is a good backup big for this team. Like, they don't need any backup big who's going to play that many minutes if Embiid stays healthy, which if Embiid isn't healthy, then they were doomed from the start. It's not like any backup center they added would replace what Joel Embiid does for this team. So Drummond isn't going to have to play that many minutes in the playoffs. He's been with the Sixers before. He knows the system. I think he'll be fine. And he had a good season for Chicago last year. I think the Sixers had a phenomenal offseason. Now, are they going to win the Eastern Conference? I think there's a shot. I think they're championship contenders, but I don't know. But I think they did the best, pretty much the best they could possibly do with the assets they had at their disposal, the cap space, and kept all their draft picks too. Like, they still have so many assets to go ahead and upgrade the roster if they need to. To me, it was an amazing offseason from the Sixers. I don't agree with this one at all. Now we've got a take from Bryson, who says that Rudy Gobert is the most overrated defender of all time. I don't agree with this. I'm a Rudy Gobert defender. Sue me. I feel like he's gotten underrated, if anything, because there are people who say that he's a bad defender, that he never should have won a depoy when he's been consistently one of the most game-changing defensive players, especially at the rim, that we've seen in a very long time. He's going to go down as one of the best rim protectors ever, and that's completely deserved. With the Jazz back all those years ago, he was basically the only thing keeping them afloat defensively. They put so many bad defenders. You go back and look at the roster, there was nobody stopping anyone on the perimeter. The only reason they were ever stout defensively was because Rudy Gobert was completely deterring anybody away from the rim. Guys weren't even challenging at a lot of points. And sometimes guys will try him, and it never goes well. This season for Minnesota, they were by far and away the best defensive team in the league. And they had a margin over the next best team in terms of defensive rating that was one of the best in the last 20 years or so. So I understand why they gave him the depoy this year. He was deserving of it, but people I feel like still will take clips of when he went up against Luka Doncic on the perimeter in this year's playoffs, and Luka hit that game-winning shot over him. It's Luka Doncic. He's one of the best scorers we've probably ever seen. Definitely one of the best isolation scorers in the game right now. There's 5 defenders in the entire world that might have stopped him on that play. Rudy Gobert, I don't even think played that bad of defense. Luka is just one of those guys. You could have even put Bam Adebayo or Anthony Davis, some of the most versatile bigs out there in Luka, and I still don't know if they get a stop. Sure, Gobert has a lot of highlights throughout the years of him getting cooked on the perimeter, but there are a lot of times also where he gets stops and being that game-changing rim protector. If anything, I think Rudy Gobert has gotten underrated in the all-time conversations. And the final take comes from HW. I had to get a Thunder one in here. Shea will be an all-star for sure, but if the Thunder are the top team in the West, they could have 3 all-stars, Chet and J-Dub as the other 2. Yeah, Shea's going to be an all-star. It would be shocking if he wasn't, assuming health. Knock on wood there. He's going to be an all-NBA guy again, but Chet and J-Dub are interesting cases. I do think both of them have a chance to be an all-star this season. Now, the hard part is the West is completely stacked. Now, it's a bit easier at the non-guard positions, like guard-wise. It's Shea, it's Curry, it's Luka, it's Ant, it's Booker, it's guys I'm forgetting right now. John Morant. It is Luka Doncic. Can't believe I didn't mention him. Kyrie Irving. There's so many great guards. De'Aaron Fox. I know there are people I didn't mention. That's just off the top of my head. That's 7 or 8 guards. But if you get to the forwards, there's a little bit more flexibility. You get to the bigs as well. I mean, there's a lot of ridiculous bigs with Anthony Davis out there and Nikola Jokic and Rudy Gobert and Cat and Sabonis and Şengün could take a rise. I mean, Victor Wembanyama is in those conversations. It might be hard for Chet, but if the Thunder are the best defense in the league and he is averaging around 20 points per game, it might be hard for them to leave him off. And for J-Dub, he's going to get a lot of extra usage this year now that Giddey's gone. His numbers when he was playing with Shea or without Shea or Giddey this past season, those numbers were crazy from him. Whenever he was getting more touches, he was taking over. I know we saw that a lot in the fourth quarter this season. Thunder fans know what I'm talking about. I think a J-Dub jump is coming. I don't know how crazy it's going to be. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he was in some MIP talks if he hits the peak of what the jump could be this season, but the Thunder do have a lot of mouths to feed. It's a really stacked conference in terms of all-star level talent, so if neither one of them were an all-star this season, I would be not that surprised, but if neither one of them were an all-star within the next few years, I would be shocked because I think they're both clearly on that trajectory, and yeah, it's all just going to depend where they're at in the standings, what the statistical output looks like, and what it looks like across the rest of the league, because it is harder than ever to make an all-star team. I'm a proponent of them expanding the all-star rosters because there's just so much talent at the moment across the NBA. It's not enough spots, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. But if I had to put money on it, I think 2 all-stars is pretty possible. 3 might be a little bit stretching it, but hey, I mean, you know what? I'm biased. I'm going to go ahead and say my guys can get it done. With all that being said, those are your hot takes. I hope you enjoyed the longer episode than usual. It was a lot of fun to film it. I love doing these videos because it's fun to interact with y'all, get to hear what y'all have to say. I know a lot of you just sit here and listen to me, so it's fun to go ahead and have that conversation with y'all. Again, if you want to be in these videos in the future, follow me over there on Twitter. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Notification bell so you don't miss out on future uploads. Got some fun stuff coming throughout the summer. I kind of now want to make, after talking about them, a Houston Rockets video. Kind of want to make a Grizzlies video. There was one take that I didn't include in this because I kind of want to talk about it in a video in its own, potentially, about James Harden and his scoring and how I feel like we've kind of forgotten just how insane he was in his prime. There was a year average 36 points per game, which is absurd. So just some video ideas. If you have anything else you want to see me cover, whether it's a team, it's a topic historically, a player individually, a take that you've seen flying around, whatever, make sure to go ahead and leave it down below in the comments. I'll try to see as many of them as I can. Leave your hot takes. And yeah, for the moment, appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say back.